What's up, and welcome to The Frequency. I'm your host, Dee Barnes, and today we're going to tackle a subject that is very dear to me. We're talking about the stereotype of the strong Black woman. Now, when you hear that, you think the strong Black woman, you think that she can handle any and everything. It's this myth that we are the superheroes, that we are the mules of the world. Well, this book that I just read by this incredible writer puts that to the test and talks about it and breaks it down thoroughly. It's called Ride or Die, a feminist manifesto for the well-being of a Black woman. And I have the writer here with us, professor of sociology, writer, and she had things in Essence and Ebony and New York Times. But this book right here is what we're going to get into. As you can see, I've already have like pages marked and everything. So I want to bring in my guest, Shanita Hubbard. What's up, sis?
Thank you for having me. I'm going to try very hard not to fangirl because I am such a fan and so honored to be here, but I'm going to try to keep it together.
No, I'm trying to keep it together because reading this book was healing. And I really want to thank you because this really touched down deep parts that we're getting ready to break down anyway. But I want people to know about you in particular because I just want the audience to know who you are and what led you to writing this book. So tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. So, yes, as you said in the introduction, I'm actually a sociology instructor and a writer. I actually teach at a writing class that I've created right now at the University of Toronto called The Business of Writing. I'm also a former clinician. I used to be a therapist for 6 years. And right now I just consult for I consult for a company. So other therapists will, send me their treatment plans and I'll help them create it or whatever. So I'm just a consultant. I'm not seeing clients right now. But my most biggest accomplishment that I'm most proud of is just the mom of a really incredible Black daughter. She's amazing. That's my biggest accomplishment.
Yes. Being a mom is definitely, I'm a mom too, and I have two daughters, a millennial and a Gen Z, a non-binary Gen Z. And so I'm definitely going to suggest that they both read this book because I think it'll open them up to a better understanding of themselves and the world around them. That's a lot what I got from it. You grew up in New York?
Yep, I'm from Yonkers.
Yonkers. Okay. So, I have to get into the hip hop because you have weaved that into the narrative of your book. So tell me about growing up in Yonkers and when you first discovered hip hop.
Oh, I love that question. I don't know how to answer that, right? Because the hip hop always was like it was just always in my life. It's not. I remember just being little. I grew up with only brothers, and I'm the youngest of my brothers. So we were, not very rich. We were poor, and I remember us living in the projects at one point, and we only had like one TV to share. It wasn't like it is now, where everybody has their own TV and smartphone. So whoever decided which I was watching, whoever was in charge of the TV made the decisions, and it was never me. I remember being younger and just my brother watching video music box, so that became our thing. I remember watching my brothers fall in love with Kane, so that became my thing, right? So they introduced me to hip hop very young, and I just, but they introduced it to me in a way where, not to sound like one of these like old school like elitists or whatever, but I was never completely like super caught up in the beats, right? It was always about the words for me. Like my brother would, that's how I remember him introducing me to Nas, like, "Yo, do you hear what this kid is saying? He's spitting," right? So he really, what he didn't realize he was doing was helping me to fall in love with words and structuring and telling stories in your own way, in your own power. So yeah, that was my introduction, not only just to hip hop, but also just to writing in general. I just didn't know it then.
Okay, yeah, I want to get into your introduction to writing, but I want to backtrack a little bit because all of the artists you named were men. When did you
hmm
first discover female rappers, women in hip hop? When were
And
you
that is
exposed to
actually that's a really good point. I fell in love through what hip hop and black literature and black writing, all through the eyes of men. So I always
it?
gravitated
Right.
towards men, right? And not even just in my artists, but in terms of the writers that I chose. Like, and then so it wasn't until maybe college where I started to kind of unpack that and
Mhm.
reject some of it and just kind of think differently about it. That I
Right.
start gravitating to it. I think one of the first female MCs that I just went like super crazy and fell hell over heels in love with was Lauryn Hill.
Right. Which made me break out my shirt after after reading the book. You know what I mean? So, what are some of the writers that you gravitated to? You mentioned
When I was younger,
some
I
of the
used to
work.
read. When I was younger, I used to read Donald Goines. I don't even know if the kids even
Right.
remember him. So I remember, like, yeah, when I was younger, when I would love Donald Goines, but then when I got into college, I think who did I fall in love with first? Omar Tyree, Terry McMillan, Zane.
Hmm.
I ain't had no business probably reading Zane, but Zane.
Right. Right.
Kim
Right.
Russell
Right.
Goldie.
I fell in love with a lot of like poetry, like Nikki Giovanni, Sonia
Mm-hmm.
Sanchez.
Mm.
Terry McMillan was actually the first writer that I stood in line to get my book signed. Like that was like
Mm.
I read that book so many times, and I love Alice Walker too. I
Oh
really love,
yes.
The color.
Did you still have the book with the signature?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good,
I
good,
do.
good.
I do. I know, and I can't believe it. And it was so many of us too. It was so many of us in line, and it was a small black bookstore in Los Angeles that's no longer here. But it was an experience I'll always treasure. But what made you want to be a writer?
I've always loved. I didn't even realize that I had a talent for writing. I know that I enjoy doing it. Right. Um, I know that I enjoy doing it. And I remember, like, all through schools, my teachers would never say things like, oh, this is a really, well written essay. They would say things like, did your mom help you with this? Always implying that it wasn't me, that they couldn't possibly. And it wasn't actually, of course, it wasn't actually into, I went to college and I went to an HBCU. And one of my professors was like, you're a great writer. So she actually like lit that spark in me.
Really? So that's what
Hmm.
inspired you. Did you know you wanted to be, an author or a journalist?
I know I Not at first. I just know I wanted to write, and honestly, I had this passion, this dream. But like all of us, right? Capitalism rules everything around us. So I remember like kind of not pursuing it and just working and just getting excelling in my career. And it wasn't until one day I had an unexpected job loss, and I started like a tiny little blog. But it was only to just like keep myself sane and centered in between rejections. Like applying for a job is not fun, so it was like during that time, I'm like, damn, I forgot how much I love this. And I really forgot that I gotten so busy building somebody else's dreams that I forgot I had my own. I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna write my book.
Yeah. I think that's one of the problems with what you discuss in the book with black women in particular, that we're so busy doing for everyone else that we forget about ourselves. Which, let's get into this. Tell people, tell the audience what this book is about. Ride or Die.
So ride or die. I use hip hop. I'm a hip hop head forever and ever. For all of its flaws, it's ours, it's mine, right? So I
Mhm.
use hip hop as an entry point to have conversations that are specific to Black womanhood. So it's not necessarily as much deconstructing the lyrics as much as it's pointing to specific themes that exist in our culture, that exist in hip hop, and that exist all throughout our community that we need to work on. So each chapter is pulling from like a different song, whether it's the theme or the song itself. In the first chapter, it's called Ride or Die, and I am
Right.
absolutely hoping that like we can defund the ride or die industrial complex. Like let's defund it, let's kill it, let's burn it to the
Well,
ground.
break down what the meaning is, the meaning of the ride and die. Break that down first,
All right. So for those
so
of
we
you
can
who
deconstruct it.
Let me tell you something. So I mentioned I was doing a talk at a college a couple of weeks ago. So it was a bunch of college students there. So I was like, "Do you guys?" I asked the audience if they was familiar with the song. Girl, everybody was like, "Oh, my mom listened to it. I think she told me about them doing verses." I was like, "Oh my gosh, baby,
Wow.
y'all never heard of the locks?" Okay, that's fine. So
Mhm.
I was like, so let me rewind. So for those of you who may be a bit too young to know who about this song, it came out in the early 2000s, and they didn't start the concept of a ride or die chick. Like it
Right.
existed, right? So a ride or die chick is someone that gives everything of herself in her relationship and her community. She's not even seeking reciprocity, right? She's doing it just because she thinks, that's how she's supposed to show up, and she's doing it for these quote unquote rewards. Like in a relationship, she goes above and beyond, bends over backwards, and be the absolute most, so you can get the coveted that title of, oh, whether it's wifey or ride or die chick, or just that's how she genuinely believes that she's supposed to show her love through her labor. And that's how
Right.
she met. And she does the same thing at work, right? You know her at work because she's a sister that says things like, "Girl, I've been at this job 5 years and I ain't never take a day off yet," as if this type of
Oh,
labor is a badge of honor, right? So she operates like that all across the sector. So the first chapter is really breaking down why that's harmful for us. And it's not just about me not liking this song, right? And it's not just
right.
about me not liking this. I pulled in the data, right? There's brilliant sociologists that did the work to show how this is concept of weathering, right? Where we talk about how
Mhm.
racism has physical implications of our bodies. But there's also
Right.
data to support that we are just like we live on an intersection of race and gender, right? Racism
Mhm.
and sexism. It's the same thing is true. So there is a lot of data that documents that when we operate like this in this strong black woman trope, I got it, I'm gonna show up and show out for everybody but myself, it physically erodes our bodies. So this is a really unhealthy concept that I want us to demolish. And then the rest of the chapters are other areas. Now, so the goal is like, okay, we finished with that ride or die ish. We know why that's not good. We done with that, right? In
Mhm.
chapter one. And then the rest of the book are other things that I want us to focus on as black
Okay,
women. And one of
wait.
my
Wait. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're gonna talk about the things that we as black women should focus on. We'll be back. The Frequency right here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds. As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Back right here in the Frequency with my guest, Shanita Hubbard. We're getting into the strong black woman trope and how it relates in her book that she wrote, Ride or Die Chick. So we just broke down Ride or Die, what the meaning is. Let's talk about strong black woman, because in going back to your first chapter, I want to get into what you said, which I thought was amazing, that hip hop didn't create the problem, but it certainly amplified the message that's harming black women. So let's talk about what's harming black women
sure
in this
there's this
stereotype.
there's this narrative and this expectation in our community, not even in our community, right? Just in
in
this,
the world.
in America, in the world, right? Where we
Hmm.
save the whole entire world. We saw this in politics around the election. Like, obviously we vote within our best interest. We do the groundwork.
Right,
We are going to go out and we're going to do some organizing because we do this for ourselves, not out of a sense of for most part. For most of us, it's not out of a sense of patriotism, but we know that we rescue ourselves. And a lot of times the
right.
world rewards this, not with assistance, not with more financial compensation, right? But more labor. Oh, this is wonderful,
Yeah.
right? It becomes more labor. And that's not, and this
Hmm.
is it's almost like the world expects us to be the mule. Save this racist country from itself, Black woman. Thank you. That's all you get in return,
Right,
if that, right? And the expectations is for us to operate like that everywhere. If we think about the pillars of our communities, like I was raised in a Black church, so I'm not speaking from an outsider. Who's running the Black church? Not who's getting
yeah,
paid to run it, but who's running this? Like, we're everywhere. Who's running our communities? Who's running our non-for-profits, right? It's Big Mama and them, it's your aunties, it's you, it's your grandma, it's me, you, and your auntie too, right? But there's
right.
nothing wrong with pouring out for our community. But we have to. I wanted us to pause in this book, right? And language is important, and we have grown
Yes,
up being called the strong Black woman, right? And our brothers, if you grew up, if you remember from like the 80s and the 90s, the title they got was endangered Black man, right? So when you hear that something is
right.
endangered, your first inclination is to do what? Protect, right? And who is it that should protect?
Protect it.
Right. So when you hear about someone is so strong, who comes for the strong one, right? Who comes to kind of check on it? So now we have a community where half of us are endangered and the other half are strong, right? So that sends this, the message and the signal that you're okay. We need to rally around you to support you. And multiple things
Right.
can be true at the same time. We do need to support and show our brothers. We have to reject this whole "you so strong, you got it, you don't need any, we don't need anybody, we're the muse of the world," this narrative. It's not just, we have internalized this. Like,
Yes, we
the
have.
world screams this and we've internalized this. And some of us are operating with it as if it's a badge of honor. Like, you even hear
Right.
Black women like aspiring to be this ride or die chick, aspiring to be this strong Black woman trope at their own expense, at our own expense.
Exactly. Do you think that the roots go back to slavery? There was, someone in your book that kept mentioning slavery, and I laughed because I thought about myself, slavery. Like, do you
Mm-hmm.
think that it started from back then?
Well, if, as you know, in slavery, none of us were human, right? We were raped and beat and just like done whatever to our bodies. And do I think there's some implication that goes to that? Of course. Like, we were seen as work mules, just like our brothers were seen as work mules, and we were also sexualized. So you have generation. We're talking about 400 years of work, sexualized work mules conditioning. That's some deep rooted conditioning. So of course.
Yeah, I was thinking about that a lot too, and I figured that that's where, because I was trying to figure out what's the origins of that. When did it all start that the black women were this, super being, super strength, and that they should be rewarded with more labor. I was trying to figure out, well, where did that come from? And then we are conditioned to, like, yes, take on more, to the fact that we're not even aware of the damage that is doing to us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You bring up some points in
Absolutely.
the book. I'm sorry, say it again.
I know, I was agreeing with you. I was thinking, I was like, yep, I was following your train of thought.
Yes, yes, because I mean, I've seen, and like you said, it's generational too. Like, I've seen it with my grandmother, I've seen it with my mother. I mean, my mom was the epitome of the strong black, and I think every black woman thinks their mom is, the epitome of strong black woman. Single mom, raising kids, doing it all on her own, working, full time. We were latchkey kids. I grew up in New York too, so I was responsible, from my little brother. We'd come home and, we had chores and homework and all this stuff, but we'd be in the house by ourselves. And um, I think that's when I started to take on the strong black woman, because I had to be responsible for my siblings,
Hmm.
and make sure that things were done, to the expectation of my mom. So when you get to that point where you're like, you're taking it on and taking it on and taking it on, it becomes like we were saying, a condition. It becomes something that's ingrained in you, and then we pass it down to our daughters. Like, how do we recognize those triggers for trauma?
I think we have to first
Because
start
it
out.
is trauma.
It is. And it's also it's in recognition, right? And the first part of it is like it's great that we can have this conversation, we recognize it, but we also have to pinpoint it when it manifests in other ways that we don't necessarily see. For example, like one of my favorite chapters in the book is called 444. And it's about, if you remember when Jay-Z released an album called 444, the title track was 444. And it was this open letter. And the song is this open letter that he wrote to the woman that was in his life. Then it was pretty much an apology. He was saying, I apologize for not showing up for you. And he was saying that apologize for infidelity. And then he talked, and it was one particular line where he says, it took for my daughter to be born to see the world through through a woman's eyes. And I'm paraphrasing here, right? And when that song came out, we celebrated, myself included. It was like, this is grown man hip hop, right? This is maturity. We get to see Jay-Z going from, I'm just, effing him and leave him because he don't effing need him. Because remember Jay-Z in Song Cry, when he was talking about, he was with a woman who helped him lease a car, and when he had bad credit, and he was still cheating on her. And his response was, I was just effing them girls. I was going to get right back. So it is maturing, right? So there was this massive celebration. So now in my chapter 444, I'm like, let's rewind the proverbial tape, so to speak. And this is bigger than Jay-Z and Beyonce, right? But the thing about hip hop was born because it always amplified the voices and the stories in our community. So this is really amplifying a community issue, right? So about someone can just say, hey, I was wrong, right? When they harm a Black woman and just be met with applause. Like, oh my gosh, there is no, how do we repair this harm, right? I talk about the concept of restorative justice, like what you hear a lot in abolition communities, because you can't just do a harm and not provide in reparations or repair it. We get that concept as Black people, right? So let's talk about this in terms of what this looks like when there's harm done to us. So when you think about this in the context of the strong Black woman trope, when there's this cultural ingrained that we are so strong, when people harm us, there's no conversation about reparations. There's like, hey, you really did harm. Let's unpack this. Let's look at this. What would it take for us to restore this before we all celebrate you and lovingly applaud you and give you flowers? You cannot do this. And one of the things I say in the book is like, D, if you had a dinner party and you invited me over and I got pissy drunk and I broke your favorite vase, a very expensive, wonderful vase, and then the next day I give you a PhD level analysis on why I got so drunk and how deeply sorry I am, but I stop there. I never say, well, then how much does the vase cost so I can replace it? If I don't do that next piece, you might hear my apology. You're going to empathize to why I got wasted, right? But you're not going to reintegrate me and extend me and allow me to come back in without making that repair, without replacing your vase, right? So we do that a lot. When the person that is harmed is a Black woman, we allow just an apology. We allow just a recognition of the pain without talking about restoration. And part of that is because we're so conditioned to see us as these strong Black women. Like, you don't think about somebody can be hurt because they're so strong. You don't think about harm and repairing because they're so strong. So when I'm saying we have to reject this narrative, I want us to say, and how do we do this? We do this by recognizing it when we're seeing it and say, hey, let's rewind a tape right here because we're perpetuating this, right? Because either you're perpetuating something or you're rejecting it, right? So we have to recognize it and reject it so that we make sure that we aren't perpetuating it.
Exactly. And I think that's the problem too. Like, we're not rejecting it. It was something you said in that chapter too, because that chapter did hit home. I felt seen. Thank you. It was something you said that really, really struck me. And it was like, because of that stereotype and because of that conditioning, it allows us to say who is disposable in our community and who deserves unmitigated grace. Whew. That hit me right there, because
if a person harms you, D, right? And then it was a very public
Right.
harm, right? And then this person grows up, maybe they quote unquote grow from that, right? And they get to say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and that's it. But if there is not a collective demand for like, no, you have to restore what was harmed. You need more than just an apology. You
Exactly.
need restoration. You need to repair this harm. You need this peace. If we allow the fact that they apologized, they grew, they're an active member contributing to our community, then we are saying that the harm that you experience is acceptable collateral damage, as long as that black man that
Right.
harmed you grew, as long as that black man became an upstanding citizen of our community, whatever that means.
Right. Exactly. Okay. We got to get more into the traumas and our favorite chapters, because I have a couple that I want to share with you. We'll be back on The Frequency.
Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
We're back right here in The Frequency with our guest, Shanita Hubbard. We're talking about the Ride or Die Chick. We're breaking it down. And one of the things we were just talking about was our favorite chapters. We just broke down 444. I want to talk about, I think in that chapter also, we were talking about repair. We were talking about, oh, no, that's a different chapter. What's one of your other favorite chapters? Then I'll go into that one.
Another one of my favorite chapters is called My Sister's Keeper. So this particular chapter is, I'm speaking to other fellow cis hetero Black women about how and why we need to do better and show up for our queer sisters, because the bar is set pretty low, right? In terms of what support looks like in our community. As long as, not even just our community, but just for the Black queer community. As long as you're not physically violent, you don't really get called in like you should. So this chapter is a loving call in to us to say, let's talk about the ways that these microaggressions manifest in our relationships with our queer sisters. Let's talk about
let me interrupt you about that. Let me interrupt you about that, because you brought up that topic. I wanted to talk about the call in and being called out. Explain the difference between being called in and called out.
Okay, so let's say, for example, Dee Barnes does something really harmful to like a queer community. I don't want to assume that you're not queer, right? But I'm just using this as an example. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, Dee, this is some real trash, harmful stuff. I love Dee. That's my girl. I don't want to drag her all over the place, but she's dead wrong. Let me gently do the equivalent of, come sit at my table, sis, because you was dead wrong. Let me break this down.
A teachable moment.
A teachable moment. Let's figure out how we're going to get right. Let me help you understand the harm that you caused, right? And I'm intentional because I care about our relationship, right? It matters to me that you grow, and it matters to me that I preserve our relationship, but it also matters that you're held accountable. Right. And the opposite of that would be, let's say, like a call out. Let's say a company that one of these corporate companies I don't give two craps about. They do some racist-ish, right? Some high-end company, fashion company does some racist-ish. Just pick an example, because I know that happens all the time.
We have so many to choose from.
In that instance, I have no concern about maintaining a relationship. I'm not deeply invested in their growth. I'm calling them out. I'm going to blast them on Black Twitter. I'm going to out them. I'm going to drag them. And I don't care how public, how ugly it is. I'm going to call them out, say what I have to say, and I'm never going to follow up to see about, are you okay with that, right? So that's just a call out. You need to be held accountable. I don't give two craps about our relationship in that. But we're calling in, it's still an interest in preserving the relationship. So, and
go ahead.
My Sister's Keeper is a loving call in to other cis hetero Black women to say, let's talk about how we need to show up better for our queer sisters. Let's identify some of these microaggressions that we probably never even realized. We understand that the bar is low because there's a lot of artists that's talking about harming, queer people. And that's a lot of people. And we look at the data that's going through with it, that's killing them. It's not physical violence, right? But that's a low ass bar.
Right.
Let's not aim for that. Let's raise the bar, so to speak, and show up for our queer sisters in a much better way.
I know. And when you use hip hop in there, and I think back on some of the lyrics that have been in a lot of songs, there's been a lot of harm done to that community. How do you think that can be repaired?
See, the thing about like the restorative justice model, it's the person that was at the receiving end of the harm that will say what restoration looks like for them. Let's say, for example, somebody harmed you. I don't get to, this is an important thing to say. I don't get to say, well, that's sufficient time has passed. It's okay. I don't get, nor do I get to say what restoration will look like for you. You tell me what that looks like, and I show up and I'll support you in receiving that. And the same thing with the queer community. You would have to ask somebody like, what restoration look like, and then I, as an ally, will show up and support and be like, bet, I'm with it. This person needs to be held accountable by doing A, B, C, and D because this is what that looks like. So all I can do is show up and support.
Okay. Yeah, I like the way you said that. I mean, thinking me personally, I know I've learned a lot from my daughter, Gen Z, non-binary, and to be respectful with pronouns. And I like the way they educate me on things like they call me in and call me out when I say things or I don't have an understanding of things. And I think that's what's key. Each one teach one, so to speak. And you're right. A key to that is listening and reciprocating because, like you said, it has to come from the person that was caused the harm and what restorative justice looks like for them. You're absolutely right. I love it. Okay. Triggers. What are some triggers that, because you brought up a lot of that in the book. And one of the key things that I wrote this down that you said, the grip of traumatic experience doesn't have an expiration date. You kind of just touched on that just now. It doesn't have an expiration date. And I feel like people don't take people assume that because it happened a long time ago that, you should be over it, should be done with. But when there's things that trigger you and remind you of, what happened, then you have to learn how to heal from that. What are some of the ways we can recognize the triggers?
Well, one, I want us to also be mindful. I love that you really starting at that point by saying that that there's no expiration date. We have to remember that for ourselves, and we have to remember that for other people, because we have to operate in grace, give ourselves grace, right? Give yourself grace. Like, it doesn't matter that, this person could have passed 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Something could happen and trigger, because our healing journey is very personal. And also I want us to remember that for each other, because I think a lot of times we don't give each other grace because we act as if there's an expiration date for how long a person takes to heal. Look, they're still talking about that. You don't know what this person's healing journey is, right? And we have to, I don't want to take it for granted that everyone understands triggers and everyone has been in therapy, right? And I also don't want to go like too psychoanalytical. So I'll just break this down. It's like, we have to pay attention to how we respond to things, right? And even if they're lighthearted things. For example, I talk about this in one of the chapters because it was a lighthearted story, but it really was like a trigger for me. I was out on a date with this, really fine, smart, wonderful guy, and we're laughing and joking, and he starts saying, and he starts talking about how he didn't grow up spending a lot of time with his dad because his dad belongs to the government. And I'm just like, when I hear that, baby, you say black man and belonging to the government in the same sentence, he's locked up. You know what I'm saying? He's away, he's doing a bid somewhere. So when I heard that, I wasn't thinking government worker. I'm a person that supported a few loved ones through incarceration. And no matter what side, and if you've ever supported somebody for real through incarceration,
I have.
Writing them, calling them, you understand that it feels like a part of you feels like you're locked up too. So no matter what side of the bars you do that bid on, you coming out with some type of trauma, right? So that's so that's really challenging for me. That's something I'm still, rectifying and healing from. So when he said that to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I understand how incarceration is so hard. So I'm thinking I'm being so empathetic because I'm sharing about how difficult it is, all the different prisons, whether it's, blah, 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 that they monetize us. And he's just like, whoa, Shanita, I made my father work for the government, girl. Like, what? I nobody say he was locked up. And I'm like, oh, okay. Wow. So those are some words that are still, the thought of somebody being snatched from their family is triggering for me because I've experienced that. So when I thought, so those are triggers. So you don't, it's really important to recognize your triggers, not so that you can run from this, not so that you can escape them, right? So because it's an indication that I'm still not healed in that area the way that I thought I would be, the way that I need to be. So it's still an indication that there's some work to do. So we have to pay attention to these things that like make us like, oh my gosh, that just kind of like snatch us out of our peace, that kind of bring us into these really offensive, guarded positions, because those are triggering something.
One of the things I related to in the book, and I recognized from reading that, and it made me think, oh my God, this is one of my triggers, was the financial trigger. Having to be stressed out about money all the time. As you know, or I don't know if you're familiar with, I was unhoused for 3 years. 2018, was evicted, had to come to terms with it and, share it publicly because I was being threatened to, I'm going to expose you by a relative that, for some reason wanted to hurt me. But I took it upon myself to be public about it and share my experience. But I noticed that once I got back into, being able to support myself and being able to live like that again, as I was reading your book, I noticed, wow, that's one of the things that triggered me too. I'm taking on all of this and I want to do this and trying to figure out, secure the bag so that I never have to be in that position again. Same thing in your book when you talk about the car being gone, because I've had my car repoed, and that trigger when you can't find your car, that panic that you feel. So it's definitely, I think it's a process as you get older, you start to recognize things or pay more attention. I think that's what the key is, paying more attention to things and being intentional.
I call them misidentified trauma responses, because a lot of times we don't see these. We haven't identified them as trauma responses, but they are. What Dee is talking about, I remember like it was over 10 years ago, and I had my car repoed, and still to this day, if I'm, you're coming outside of a grocery store and you go to the wrong parking spot, and for me, when that happens, I'm at the wrong parking spot and I see an empty spot, baby, my heart starts racing. I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm back to that moment. Right now, if I hear like a garbage truck coming, beep, beep, that sounds like a tow truck to me. So
tow truck, exactly.
Yeah, that they're coming from my car, and my car is not behind. My truck is paid, not paid for yet. But what I'm saying is that still lives with me, that stays with me. And we have to, and a lot now, it's important, right? Misidentified trauma responses are important because they're not always as obvious. One of the ways that my financial, like if you've ever experienced financial hardship, even when you do get the bag, even when you do come up, there's a piece of that still stays with you. But it manifests in different ways. For me, and I still struggle with this, I remember saying it was a season where I'm saying yes to everything. I'm teaching at the university. I designed a class and teaching at the University of Toronto. I'm teaching at a college out here in Pennsylvania. I'm writing all over the place. I'm working on my Soros Fellowship. I'm writing my book. I'm speaking all over the place. And I'm doing this because I'm terrified that one day the ask are going to stop. And if the ask stop, will I be broke again? So now that I'm getting money, trauma robs you of your present joy because you're still stuck in what happened before.
Exactly. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about how to regain your joy and healing, because that's the most important thing. We'll be back. The Frequency.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Back right here in the frequency with my guest, Shanita Hubbard. We're talking about The Ride or Die, her book, The Manifesto, Feminist Manifesto for the Well-Being of Black Women. Okay, so we just talked about trauma. I want to get into how do we find our joy and healing. How do we do that? 'Cause I think that right there really was the essence of the book. It took you through all of the things that, the weight of the world basically on your shoulders, and how to now find balance. Stop taking on all that weight and now find balance. How do we do that?
I didn't know if I was going to actually share this story or not, but just to be really transparent and honest, especially because we're talking about healing. This is a really challenging season for me. Like, if I was watching a show and a character was going through this, I would be like, that writer is a bit heavy-handed because they're doing the most now. It's getting
wow.
So, like, my book came out November 8th, and then right after, my intro.
November 8th when? November 8th last year?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it just came out. So my introduction in my book is an ode to Black women. And I literally started off with saying, honey, Sadie Olive, her 7 daughters are not to be played with. It's a tribute to my grandmother and my aunts, because they are the women who, and my mom, like the women that mean the most to me in this world.
Right.
So my book came out November 8th. Maybe like 8 days later, my grandmother died. The day after her funeral. The day after her funeral, the aunt that helped raise me died. So it was just, so I ended up having to push back like book talks and events because I just was not in a place. Like, I had to make a decision, like, even regardless of my past experiences, I'm afraid the calls will stop asking. I wasn't okay. I couldn't show up and not be okay. So then, so now we are in February, and I just started to kind of feel like myself again. And when my grandmother passed, another one of my aunts was going to move back in her house. So everyone showed up at her house 2 days ago to help her pack and help her move, only to discover a dead body. She passed. And I'm just like, what? So it's been,
I'm so sorry, sister.
Thank you. So I'm just like, had to think. So my point is, healing is about being honest with where you are and what you need in the moment. Like, when it happened in November, I had to cancel everything because I couldn't. Like, I just emotionally couldn't. I had to be honest about that. And now I'm in a place where I need something different. Like, I don't know what you believe spiritually, right? So I know that I need something different. I need a whole lot of prayer, but I also need not just work. I need really intentional work. Like, I knew that we were having this conversation today, right? I knew that we were going to be talking about like restorative justice. I knew that this was going to be a balm to my soul. So now part of your healing journey for me is recognizing where I am and understand that sometimes you need something different. Like, before, I couldn't. Like, I couldn't have done this interview with you a couple of months ago, but I know that I needed something different, right? So I'm recognizing that when you need something different, and that might change tomorrow. So in addition to like grief counseling and spiritual practices, I'm also paying attention to let me be open and understand that I'm going to need something different at each stage of this, whether that stage is Monday and the next stage is Wednesday, right? So just really being open. And then I really do believe in this truth and power and honesty, right? Where we heal together.
I agree.
And that's how I actually ended the book, talking about like bell hooks instructed us to heal in community, right? So I can share my pain if I think it's safe. And that's, and then we can help each other heal. So how do we heal? We recognize that it's a journey. We recognize that on the journey we may need something different. And then you create and you connect with your community, whether that's virtual or whatever, and allow people to pour in and give yourself balm as you need it.
I noticed you mentioned safe, and one of the things in your book you discussed was not having black women and black girls, especially younger, didn't have a safe space within the community. And it really made me go back and think about, my neighborhoods, which were rough, New York and New Jersey, and the corner, and not having that safe space, and the experiences that I had. And I completely agree with you that healing looks like being honest with yourself. And that's hard sometimes. Sometimes you don't want to face that truth, about yourself, or maybe even about a person you're in a relationship with, where you're like, that maybe it's not good. You see the red flags, but you ignore them. And I think that goes back to a Black woman feeling like, oh, she can, or women too, women in general. She can fix this person, or she can heal this person, or she's the exception to the rule. And I think that honesty comes with maturity. It also comes with having an example. And that's one of the things that I love about your book. Your book is a complete example of taking the time to take it in, take yourself in. You have your eyes on the world, and you're able to analyze everything and everybody but yourself. So when you have to reflect that mirror back on you, I think that's I can't agree enough that honesty that you have with yourself is when the healing begins. And it worked for me too. I mean, I've had, we've all had our share of traumatic experiences, but I know that once I started speaking truth to power, and once I started feeling like just being honest, it helped me in that journey. And I mean, I'm not complete. I think it's something that it's an ongoing process. I think we have to do the work for ourselves, whether that's therapy or, community service, whatever it takes. I think that, once you recognize it and you're honest with yourself, that you can evolve and you can heal.
I keep hearing I keep hearing you say like honestly, right? And I think let's just think about sometimes we're reluctant to divest from a harmful situation or a toxic situation because we're waiting on a return from an investment, right? So let's think about it in terms of relationships. There's times where and you reach a point where you realize this relationship dynamic, something about this relationship is harmful and it's hurting you, but you done put in 5 years, you done did a bid with this person, you done poured into them financially, you done know eventually you're waiting for a return for this investment. And this is the same thing is true in our careers. There's sometimes we recognize that there's this element in this career or this career path that's toxic for me. I know this because I'm coming home and I can't sleep at night unless I get high because they're stressing me out. I know this because I'm crawling every night. I know, I recognize these signs that this is harmful, but you're waiting for an investment, right? And part of being healing requires honesty. And so you have to be honest about that too. Like, you know what? I know this is toxic, but I waited this long because I was waiting for an investment, but it's not going to happen. You can't heal from whatever you don't face, right? So you have to be honest with yourself and show up for yourself and face it, because if you don't ever face this, you're simply not going to heal.
Right. How do you, as a Black woman and as a mother, how do you deal with healing while raising a Black daughter and not passing on those, generational traumas, I should say, or generational patterns to your child? How do you do it? Because I've struggled with it too.
I actually invite her in to see me fully as best as I can, because I know that we all go through the stage where we see our mom as superwoman, right? And then at some point you realize she's not, and there's a little bit of disappointment. And then a lot of times we internalize this superwoman and we want to be that, but we're not. We're human. Right. So I try to introduce myself as just a human to her. So we have these conversations about areas that I struggle with. Like, for example, when I'm in this grind season, I'm working all the time. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm doing this so that I can give her a better life, so that she doesn't go through this, right? But then I get so exhausted sometimes, and now I'm snapping. Like, I'm working so that she cannot go through what I went through financially, but now I'm snapping at her all the time. And I'm impacting the energy that's in the home. So it don't matter how much I'm saving if the energy is off and she don't feel safe coming to me and she don't want to talk to me. Like, I'm hustling backwards here. So I have these open conversations with my child about, listen, I really struggle with this, and I recognize that I don't believe in hitting, but there's other ways to cause harm. You may be a parent that don't hit, but you snap at your kid all the time so they don't feel free, right, to talk to you. So I have these open conversations with her, and it hurts because she'll co-sign and she'll give me examples and she'll tell me how it feels. But then at the end of the conversations, I go, well, let's create a system to hold me accountable, right? Let's check back in on this, right? This is my goal. My goal is to and it's not, I'm honest with, I'm like, listen, part of this because I be trying to white knuckle it, right? I'm working all the time, and sometimes I don't take breaks when I want to, because I feel like I'm working all the time, so my free time should go to you. I said, but I'm a woman and I'm a mom, and sometimes I need me time and I need to do this. So with that apology came a plan on how I'm going to do better. I'm going to start taking breaks for myself, and I'm going to stop doing this, and I'm going to do that. Good. And also, you tell me when I'm not and hold me accountable, and let's check in on this weekly. So I have these conversations with her, and I heal in public as much as I can. Like, I'm hurting right now, and I tell her she's hurting. Like, I lost my grandmother, that's her grandmother too, like, right? So we're both heartbroken. Exactly. So I asked her, like, what do you need today? Do you just need to sleep? Or because I feel like I just need to sleep, but I feel like I'm abandoning you. Let's talk about this, because this didn't come with no blueprint, right? So I heal in public. I create accountability plans, and I show her that I'm human.
Ah, that's beautiful. What are your goals for the book? Where do you want to see this book? How do you want to see this book used with women all over the world?
I want them to do what years ago. Remember when Chicken Heads Came Home to Roost by Dr. Joe Morgan came out?
Yes.
When the first time I read that book, there was a chapter that split me open. It made me look at myself and really interrogate my own practices, and it made me change and think deeper. I want people to read this, not just for Black women. It's for, of course, I wrote it for Black women, but for anyone that loves and values us, you could. This is a book as a gem for you too. I want people to be honest about their own thoughts and ways that they haven't showed up for themselves and for other Black women, and create a plan of accountability and for yourself and for our community, for us.
Right. There it is. Wow. We've covered all of it. I'm telling you, get this as a gift. Give it to all your sister friends. It's amazing. I'm going to read it again because it did for me what you just said. I opened it up and it helped me realize some things about myself. And I want to thank you, give you your virtual flowers. Thank you for, just having the courage to be honest and write this, for us. It's truly amazing. I love how you've taken just, you put the hip hop in it, and because the hip hop was part of it. And I know we're celebrating, the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and, we've come a long way, but we have so much more to go. But this book definitely was a game changer. And thank you. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for writing this. Virtual flowers.
Thank you so
much.
Thank
you for being a guest. I really appreciate you.
So much love.
All right, y'all. The Frequency right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be back.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
So thank you, everybody, for tuning into The Frequency right here on the Black Star Network. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with our guest, Shanita Hubbard. We're talking about the Ride or Die Chick. We're breaking it down. And thank you for tuning in. We out.